Ja, guten Tag. Ich begrüße Sie alle sehr herzlich zu diesem Festival, die Tage baltischer Literatur. Welcome to the Days of Baltic Literature. Hier im Saal und auch zu Hause im Livestream, die uns von zu Hause aus zuschauen. Und I'm happy to welcome here on stage Eckhard Schumacher, Hasso Krull, Dovilė Kuzminskaitė, Artis, Ostups und Krista Belševica. It's a pleasure to have you here in Zurich. Welcome. And this panel is a cooperation, in fact, with the Internationales DFG Graduiertenkolleg, Baltic Peripeties, Narratives of Reformations, Revolutions and Catastrophes. And ich bin Isabelle von Landen, ich habe das Programm des Festivals kuratiert, and when I was researching for the program, I found the name of your college, and I was interested at once because it's in fact what also the Festival of Literature is about, the narratives of which spaces do we live in, how these spaces do change us, how we do change them, and also what is disappearing, what is reappearing. This was your idea for the panel, the disappearing and reappearance of things. And the whole festival is about like merging points between caricatures. We have been talking about caricatures, images, translations, poetry and prose, and academics also. So I think there will be more like merging points in this panel now. And this is all I can say about it, because this is all I know about it, as it was a carte blanche you developed. And so I'm very curious about what is going to happen now, and the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm happy and impressed that you are here, and I'm very happy that we can be here and that we have this carte blanche. We, that is, as you mentioned, Dovilė, assistant professor at Vilnius University, a translator and poet, Hasso Krull next to me, a poet, critic, translator and literary scholar at University of Tallinn, Krista Belševica, Latvian writer, literary scholar, currently working on a dissertation at Greifswald University, and Artis Ostups, Latvian poet and literary scholar at the University of Tartu, associated with us at University of Greifswald. And I would like to mention somewhere in this room, on this side, is Alexander Waszyński, another literary scholar, coordinator of this research training group, Baltic Peripeties, and kind of the mastermind behind everything we do here today, not only in terms of coordination. So I'd like to mention Alexander too. My name is Eckhard Schumacher. I'm a literary scholar responsible for modern German literature. So I'm a kind of foreign body here today. At the University of Greifswald, and I'm the speaker of this international research training group, Baltic Peripeties, in which we bring together different disciplines in order to ask to what extent literary, journalistic, scholarly narratives constitute what we call the Baltic Sea region. And if we call our project Baltic Peripeties, it's not restricted to the Baltic states, but we always talk about the Baltic Sea region. Alongside and across the borders of languages and states, alongside and dealing with historical turning points, not least current turning points, like turns of the times, the pandemic, the war, the invasion. In this context, we understand literature not only as an object of analysis, but as a mode of cultural research. So therefore, today, we will not present scholarly analysis of the Baltic Sea region, but rather literary text from the Baltic Sea region, and for today at least from the Baltics, I guess. So the fact that, as I mentioned before, the four authors are also literary scholars may not be so important today, but it may not hurt either. So two are part of the Greifswald group, Baltic Peripeties, Krista, and Artis. And with them, I'm pleased that Dovilė and Hasso accepted our invitation and will also present their text to offer and have a common ground translated into English. And that's why I'm talking English right now. But each will, or at least has the chance to read a text in his or her own or in the original language. Before that, a few words about two concepts we'd like to start from, of course, in order to end somewhere else. So maybe this works. When we speak of Baltic peripeties, we refer to the concept of peripeteia, with which Aristotle, in his Poetics, names the decisive turning point in tragedy. You may be familiar with diagrams like this, commonly used in this context, and maybe I have a pointer here. I think I marked the peripeteia as the kind of turning point. We extend this term to refer to other contexts, to turning points, tipping points in prose, poetry, but also in the discourse of cultural studies, of historiography, of the social sciences. So peripeteia is not a very frequently used term, but it is a word that, from our point of view, rightly appears on the website Otherworldly. You see this on the right-hand side. A blog for, and I quote, strange and lovely words. And there peripeteia is explained in our sense as a sudden or unexpected reversal of circumstances, the point of no return. So what happens at a turning point after a reversal? By marking a distinction between a before and an after, new perspectives become visible, others disappear, vanish, for better or worse. So in this sense, the vanishing point in our title can be a point that disappears, loses visibility, gets lost. But at the same time, from the 16th century on, vanishing point is also a concept in art theory, leading to a somewhat different direction. And the original, coming from Italy, punta de fugo, or the German equivalent Fluchtpunkt, even opens up another dimension which is connected with the idea of vanishing, but of course Flucht and fugo, fleeing, has other dimensions. And maybe we have the chance to come back to this. So usually defined as a point in an image onto which parallel lines appear to converge, the vanishing point offers and produces perspective. You can see it illustrated here by a picture of a Baltic Sea pier near Greifswald. So that's Greifswald contribution to this. And on the right-hand side by a technical explanation. The vanishing point does not have to be located within the picture. And often it is a somewhat hidden point, a point of intersection located outside the framework. And if you want, imaginary point, usually projected into the distance. And in this respect, the vanishing point may also be referred to as a direction point, producing perspective or perspectives in plural. So the mathematical explanation of 1-point, 2-point, or 3-point perspective you can see on the left, and the poster for Richard C. Serafian's 1971 feature film Vanishing Point on the right show that it is possible to integrate more than one vanishing point into an image. And in this case, as the movie poster reminds us, you have to watch carefully. Because everything happens fast. I don't know if this will be the case today, but at least I think I have to hurry up. So the proposal for our experimental arrangement today, and it is something like an experimental arrangement, is to relate this concept of the vanishing point and of vanishing also to the discussion of literary texts, in the double meaning of vanishing and establishing perspectives, of visibility and invisibility, of absence and presence, of perception and positioning in space, of projections and intersections where things may or seem to converge or do the opposite. So if literary text, as I would like to claim, can channel or challenge perspectives, viewpoints, turning points, they also might have the power to offer, to construct or to deconstruct structures, be it temporal structures, time regimes, or physical structures, or imaginary structures. So from this point of view, poetry could be seen as a method to get attached or detached from places, spaces, and their temporalities, physical or imaginary, provoking new or overseen perspectives, bringing up questions of positioning, of belonging, of identity, not only, but also regarding the Baltic Sea region or the Baltics. So what are we going to do? We change roles of presenter, discussant, and moderator, and we will approach our experimental setting in 3 steps. We begin with texts by Artis and Krista. I think Artis will start, is that right? Then we have a round of discussion. Then Hasso Krull will read, discussion, and then Dovilė will read and discussion, and then maybe it might be 6 o'clock. And we'll see. So, we start with Artis.
Yeah. Hello. I will read just 5 poems, and the first 4 poems come from my 3rd collection of poetry, Gestures, which came out in Latvian in 2016 and was 2 years later translated into English. So first I will read the very first poem of this book in Latvian and then proceed in English. Pēc neatkarības atgūšanas. Kad iznācām no baznīcas, virs pasta sarkanās dzegas, ap mēnesi apdrupušo ragu pulcējās zvaigznes, skatītas caur nospeķotām brillēm. Mana māte ģērbās melnā filca mētelī, ziema vilka tam šķērsām krītu, kā skolēns pār tāfeli. Vēlāk uz guļamistabas sienas es uzzīmēju vārtus, kamēr no skapjaugšas mani vēroja ģipša sievietes biste. Vai tāli skaņas pārsitieni no dzelzceļa un šosejas, viesa cerības uz citu, plašāku ainavu, dārzi dega ar kraukļu tumšo, ķērcošo liesmu. The same poem in English. After regaining independence. When we left the church, stars gathered around the moon's crumbled horn above the red cornice of the post office, seen through greasy glasses. My mother wore a black felt coat. Winter pulled a chalk across it like a schoolboy on a blackboard. Later, I drew gates on my bedroom wall while the plaster bust of a woman observed me from the top of the closet. Did the far-off clicks from the railway and the highway give hope for a different, more vast landscape? The gardens burned with a caving, raven-black flame. And this next poem is a kind of dystopian version of Rilke's famous poem about Apollo's torso. After Rilke. Everything will remain partially unsaid, but once someone wrote, "My chest is like a lamp lit up by a look," and it truly did shine for the pleasure of cicadas, as I inhaled the nightly scents of the mountains. Now the cracked screen, snowy like after a heavy blow, shows a raven stuck in oil and a leer with frayed nerves, a marked-up sheet of paper tossed in the grass, and me, myself, like paper as well, burned halfway, but my eyes will stay silent. What once was music and light, tones and cascades, is now a faint whisper and a lighter flame. Look, it's going out in the last muse's face before she comes and cuts. The morning before revolution. The queen's head shrouded with rumor and piercing glances, is lifted from the bird's feathers. There is not a sentence deeper than a child's shoe, just slight resemblances, dangerously approaching sadness. Just the snow-white bonnet of the servant floats in the morning light. Just the sun's merciless gong against which, arriving from the west, thunders, clubs strike. Laying under the canopy they bolt upright, the lovers irked. They seem like toys which must live with springs in their backs. Letters to Zuzette. A northeasterly blows, Hölderlin's favorite wind, since 1803 at least, when he composed the hymn An Denken in Tübingen, and until this very moment under totally different poplars. They could be buds in a gradual explosion, or September shadows filled with blossoms, if you have to wander in time. But I fail to vanish there with you who forever remains in a foreign land. That's how Hölderlin lived for his Zuzette, the wife of a Frankfurt banker, Diotima in later texts, to whom he wrote regularly, until he lost his mind, and Zimmer the carpenter, an educated man, gave him a room in a tower with a view to the river and meadows. No trace of brown tan flesh exists anymore, just an eclipse of images. And the last poem is somewhat new. I wrote it last year after a few weeks of the beginning of Russian invasion. The Clouds of March, and it has an epigraph. Wie die Wolken des Himmels sind, Martin Heidegger. Neither silent nor speaking up, they lie with a rock in their hands, and the wind flicks through their faces like burning books. Somewhere in Zhytomyr or Irpin, but we, the protected, will say the truth, so clouds stay clouds in the sky. Thank you.
And I will read some poems which are not only poems but in a way a research paper. I was writing my master's paper on a different topic, but I got an Erasmus scholarship, so I did that in Hamburg. And on my free time, I decided that I will observe Hamburg as using the method, ethnographical method, ethnography, and write maybe a small paper or something like that. I studied anthropology. But then when I have gathered the data, I understood that any type of research paper will look very, not really at all good enough. So I wrote some poems, some research poems. I will read 4 of them. Worry. Hamburg spent almost 800 million to build an opera. Now Hamburg will have an opera like Sydney. Hamburg has always worried about the fact that it's not Sydney, just like Sydney has always worried about the fact that it's not New York, just like Riga, in turn, has always worried about the fact that no one actually cares that they aren't like Riga. Which is why Hamburg now has its Elba Philharmonie and Riga has its National Library, nicknamed the Castle of Light, which people can look at while on their way to work, by train, or the second wagon of the tram. Whether New York is worried about anything, no one knows. a standstill. This evening is traveling in such a slow-motion manner that even the metro stops at every fourth stop and waits for time to catch it. A homeless man walks slowly on the platforms and counts the change from home havers' wallets. Home havers are safer in groups. Now, in the loneliness after midnight, the responsibility squeezes the shoulder of everyone personally. Coins jingle. The train continues to slide easily like on coconut oil towards the station. Black men in half-empty trains remain standing less and less. Not one white woman next to them turns up their nose at them so late at night they just smell womanly, like wine, and perhaps will smell of cigarettes and sex in the next morning. I listen to what is playing in the earphones of a girl next to me reading St. Pauli station. 4 men get on and I listen to them. They're screaming about Merkel fills up the metro car. They scream so loud about Merkel as only Germans can do. You can like, you can dislike Merkel. Time in Hamburg is not my time. Those homeless people are not my homeless people. I'm a black woman hiding under white skin and vegan cakes on Wednesday mornings, the pet of my German friends, shown off, fed and pitied when there's whimpering for home. My watch is an hour behind, and at each station I can step off. I cannot step off. Conclusion. The overall Google reviews rating for the Elbe River is 4.5 stars, just like the Daugava, which is why I can imagine that the Hamburg people like the Elbe River on average as much as Riga people like the Daugava. London's Thames and Paris' Siena get a lower rating. Rome's Tiber does as well. I hope that Rome's inhabitants have other things that I like in Rome. And the last one, home. Piano music, serene, like lunch after therapy, a hymn to the world. With their wings, ducks take flight and begin their way back to spring. She presses her nose against the glass, breathes in the approaching light. The wings' feathers soak up the wind down to their roots, and so the bird's presence in the heavens. And a big thanks to Jade Will, our beautiful, wonderful translator who translates my and Artis poems. And now I will read the last poem in Latvian, so you hear my wonderful language as well. Klavieru mūzika, mierīga kā pēc terapijas pēcpusdiena, pasaules himna. Pīlis paceļas spārnos un sāk ceļu atpakaļ uz pavasari. Viņš piespiež degunu pie stikla, ieelpo tuvojušos gaismu, spārnu spalvas iesūc vēju līdz saknēm un iedēsta sevi debesīs.
So thank you, Krista, and thank you, Artis, for reading. Maybe to start, we can turn back to my initial remarks on turning points affecting temporal structures and temporality. I think both are engaged in questions of temporality. So the Hamburg time is not my time. My time is an hour back. And in Artis' poems, we have the after Rilke which is not only temporal but also temporal, I would say. And we have the before and the after again and again. Maybe, and that was the idea of our panel, I asked the two who did not yet read poems to react, and maybe you can connect to this question of temporality. What is the role of this after and before here, or this time which is not my time? Could you connect to these topics, having heard the poems?
Well, personally, I know what time it is. That is not after and what is not before and what is not my time. It's the mythical time, where the poems are always plunge into and sometimes resurface. And while listening to your poems, I often somehow perceived these plunges. Basically, they were all plunges, but then also some points to resurface. So basically, maybe these were the vanishing points, in the sense that you vanished from this mythical time for just a second. But then, of course, you plunged into it again, and it was like a flow. That's how I perceived it. I don't know if you agree with me or not. Artis.
Yes, I think that's a good observation. This plunging and resurfacing, yeah. Yeah, but in general, I think, but I know that I'm completely obsessed with temporality in my poetic writing and also in my academic writing. That's basically all I think about when I write. So of course every poem is in a sense about the past, I think. Well, almost every poem. Maybe someone is writing futuristic poems still, but usually poems are about the past or more distant past, which is often the case in my poetry. And yeah, for today I quite consciously chose those poems that speak about some kind of change, either the moment right after the change has happened, or the moment before something could change. So I think these moments are very fruitful and very inspiring for poetry. Yeah.
Dovilė, I think you were about to say something.
I'm always about about to, but never on time. Yeah, I think that what we can see in both poetry, ways of expressing themselves poetically, is that they are observing, but the ways of observation are kind of a bit different, because for one of them, the visual aspects seem to be the one that kind of drives to think, and for the other one, what is also very beautiful, the experience of time, is the object of observation, and then what inspires to write, kind of to perform the poetic act. So in this sense, we could also think that we observe not only through looking at things, but also through experiencing the time, experiencing the space. So observation is not only a visual manner of doing things.
Yeah. And Krista, you introduced your poems by relating to anthropology, and you said, and I think written, it's on the title, like it's ethnographic studies. So the question ethnography is always confronted with is the question, who speaks where and from which point of view, about whom, and what is the position of the observer and of course of the observed. So maybe we can come back to this title and your initial remarks that this for you is a kind of research within the poem. So my question would be, could you or could the others locate the position of this observer?
I think the interesting thing about anthropology is that it's one of the fields of science that never denies its subjectivity, and it was also important for me, it is important for me in my research, that research is always a circular process. You are in your subjective mind or your subjective emotions. A research is also an emotional being. And then when you go out, you see something, but the only way you can observe the thing and really be aware of the thing, you need to come back. So I went out, I did the ethnography, I did write the keywords, I did write how the Germans walked, how they talked, how they acted, how their mimics worked, everything. I observed a lot of them. So, and then I came back to me and I made this whole bunch of data meaningful. And my mother was very mad. She said, "This is not how you write poetry. It's bad." And but I think it's very close to how we as human beings function. We function through stories. We function through making meaning of the world, and we make meaning of the world through making stories. So this was my story, a little tiny bit of knowledge which I brought into the world through my observations.
So, as a scholar for modern German literature, I'm supposed to ask about Rilke and Hölderlin and Heidegger, but I will not follow this. But I'm going to ask you, what Hasso and Dovilė, how do you relate to or react to these three or more references to German literature and philosophy in this context?
Oh, so basically you decided to make it difficult for us, right? As suddenly we have to become scholars of German literature. I think that, and I will respond in a very vague and abstract way, as scholars sometimes do, is that what I see when he uses the intertext is also a way of thinking, which kind of, I think that there is not only direct mentioning of Rilke and his importance, or Hölderlin and his importance, what is significant in the text, but also how he integrates those elements, because those are not direct quotes, those are not references just to the text, but to a broader cultural context. And I think that that's a way of think, equally as Krista's way of thinking is to observe, take notes, and then do things. So in both ways, what I could perceive is how thinking about something, looking at something, we come back to ourselves sometimes, and it is beautiful because as scholars, academics, we normally pretend that we are very objective, that there's no personal way there. But really, loads of times when you look at things, you kind of see what you want to see or what you are capable to see, being who you are. So that's that, I think.
Yes, I basically agree. I just think that also this mentioning of Rilke and Heidegger, it's in a way, if it concerns poetry, then it is also a game with proper names, because the proper name in a poetic text, it always has some special power and invokes something, and at the same time it hides many things, because well, it's it might even overshadow the poem sometimes. And then when also a citation is followed, like this very strange citation by Heidegger, then, well, it always comes to my mind, is it real? Did he really say it? And in what context? And how does the poet really relate to this figure and to this citation? So it opens up such a, well, a space of different possibilities that sometimes after such a reference I'm incapable of reading the poem at all. I just will be mumbling and thinking over and over, wondering what it is all about, and I forget that it was the beginning of the poem.
And the name Heidegger here is connected with this quote dealing with the Wolke, and it's the clouds of March, and this observation that a strong marker as a name can well reveal something or be a reference, but also makes things like invisible or leads to disappearance, reminds me of a very interesting and scholarly paper by a literary scholar Werner Hamacher, who wrote on Heidegger and Hölderlin and on the Wolke. And the title of this paper is one of my favorite, all-time favorite titles, The Word Wolke, If It Is One. And I think this is what you just described. So we talked a lot about temporal structures and temporality, and as you all know, time marches on. And trying to look at my smartphone, it says we have to switch. I would like to switch to the next author. So I would like to ask Hasso Krull to read. And I think we'll switch the background.
My body is the dream of my ancestors. Bone and skin, hair and fat, they saw it long ago, but so little time has passed that no one believes it. My ass isn't bulbous and springy just because someone sat upon it for thousands of years, then lent me the cheeks. Don't just wear them down. When you sit, then sit with pleasure, sit with a purpose. And so now I do, but my thoughts won't stay still. I fidget, I stand up, go to the window, out of the door, hurry to the shore, and there you walk, gorgeous Europa, the old pagan's lover. But say, why do you hold that bloody knife? The sun and moon wished to marry. In the evening, the sun combed her golden locks on the seaside and cast them into the waves as a bridge. Soon the moon appeared, as joyful as a wasp. Underground, there lived an old crone who loved the moon. One evening, she stole a sword and cut a fissure into the body of the earth. By the light of the moon, she climbed out and said, "You are to become my husband." "No," said the sun, "the moon must live in the sky. He is my companion and walks on the water." They fought and pulled at the moon till it tore. The old crone struck with her sword and seized the moon's heart for herself. Thus, the sun got the husband without the heart. He is pale, grows and wanes again until he vanishes into his nest underground. However, there is light galore even at night. The moon's heart glows and shows travelers their way. But the sword that sank to the seabed pulses beneath the seaweed and seashells. It yearns to have the moon's heart back. Alice went to Wonderland. She grew up, but loathed playing cards. She found the Queen of Hearts to be particularly vile. Alice always removed it from every deck she came across and stuck it into the freezer. The Queen's froze turned waxen blue. One day, Alice smoked a pipe. It was a little Indian pipe made of light sandalwood. She refilled the pipe, lit it 8 times. Then Alice felt hot. She opened up the freezer to grab ice cream. A tall, pale-faced woman entered the room. Her lips were frosted, colorless, snow on her eyelids. The woman smiled, her teeth glittering and translucent like a row of ice cubes. "You were expecting me," she said, and reached out a hand. In her palm, a tiny blue heart. "You may have this now. It is the soul of a great seashell you found on the beach as a child. You needn't fear the sea's roar any longer." There are holes in the road. There are holes in the earth. Stepping forward, I notice there are holes in my boots. Where there are holes, my socks show through. I can see them. I know this because there are holes in my skull. When rain falls into water, there are holes in the water. As the droplets fall, I hear them because there are holes in my ears. I stand and breathe because there are holes in my nose. I move forward and think. Yes, there are holes in my thoughts. There are holes in my words. Lao Tzu thought everything necessary came from emptiness. But tell me, friend, what use would emptiness be if it wasn't made of holes beside holes? Large holes, small holes. Holes exist. Birth and death are holes. There are black holes in the universe. Maybe there are exits to another place made of holes. Exits are holes. the mouth, the heart, the intestines are holes. And now the last one first in English, then in Estonian. I guess when I have read the English version, you will understand Estonian perfectly well. When is mommy coming home? I don't know. But when's she coming home? In about 2 hours. Does that mean in 2 minutes? No, 2 hours from now. I can't wait. When is mommy coming home? In about an hour and a half. How long is a half hour? An hour and a half is about 100 minutes. Does it mean in 100 hours? No, 100 minutes. I can't wait. When is mommy coming home? Oh, in 20 minutes. You mean just 10 minutes? Yes, 10 and then another 10. That's too long. No, just 20 minutes. I can't wait. When is mommy coming home? I don't know. But when's she coming home? Maybe a couple of minutes. You mean a couple of hours? No, just a couple of minutes. I can't wait. Millal emme koju tuleb? Ma ei tea. Aga millal ta koju tuleb? Umbes 2 tunni pärast. Kas 2 minuti pärast? Ei, ikka 2 tunni pärast. Ma ei jõua oodata. Millal emme koju tuleb? Umbes 1,5 tunni pärast. Kui kaua on pool tundi? 1,5 tundi on umbes 100 minutit. Kas 100 tunni pärast? Ei, 100 minuti pärast. Ma ei jõua oodata. Millal emme koju tuleb? No, 20 minuti pärast. Kas ainult 10 minutit? Jah, 10 ja siis veel 10. See on liiga pikk aeg. Ei, ainult 20 minutit. Ma ei jõua oodata. Millal emme koju tuleb? Ma ei tea. Aga millal ta koju tuleb? Umbes paari minuti pärast. Kas paari tunni pärast? Ei, ainult 2 minuti pärast. Ma ei jõua oodata.
Thank you, Hasso. And now it's my turn to ask questions. And connecting somehow the first reading and the second one, all the 3 poets are using some kind of references, some kind of intertext, some kind of symbolic capital even. And connecting that with our topic, I was thinking, is that a way of hiding, vanishing, disappearing?
Yes, in a way, it's a game of hide and seek. I think so. But of course, this game of hide and seek, I think it's a more important poetic principle even than peripeteia, because otherwise you cannot write a poem at all, and otherwise also you cannot even make a tragedy. Something must always be hidden and then reappear, disappear again and reappear. This is just inevitable, and but that's also basically the game of life itself. And I think, here was Heidegger was mentioned several times, but that's how Heidegger thought about the truth, aletheia, that it's something that comes into light for a certain amount of time, but other things will be in the shadow then. That's truth, the game of truth.
I want to say something a bit different. So if you want to continue on that.
Maybe just because you mentioned peripeteia, I think what you just explained is why in Aristotle's Poetics, the peripeteia is closely connected to recognition. So in Oedipus Rex, we have the peripeteia and the recognition, and that's what leads to the tragic ending. So I think recognition might be closely connected to what you just explained with this question of absence and presence, of coming back of something which you didn't know before, maybe.
Yeah, you said it better than me.
My comment was more, Dovilė, you mentioned symbolism or symbolic narratives that are somehow, or symbols that make their own narratives. And I think when I read poems of also Dovilė and Hasso, then there is a big tradition of symbolism, a sad tradition maybe, because when the Soviet occupation took time, the poetry was the symbolism was a tool how to really speak or how to hide things that you weren't able to say. So, in this case, of course, the symbolism is completely different, but it reminds me of this narratives that connect maybe the Baltic states and also connect the Baltic poetry. That first it was because of the Soviet censorship, but I really appreciate, and I also see in the Latvian literature, I don't know if it's in Lithuanian literature happening as well, that authors sometimes try to make up those new mythologies because the tool is already present, and in a more playful way, as a game, they try to redefine the language a bit, and I think it's a very... I really appreciate this work that is done through poetry, and in this case it was Alice, it was the moon and the sun. I remember it was a quite popular game we played in kindergarten. I don't know if Estonian kids play it as well. The narrative is very similar. The moon wants to marry the sun, and then the sun runs away, and the girls always wanted to be the sun and run away, and the moon catches them. So I believe, that those narratives and those tools go through, and but in this case, it becomes more of a game, more of a play. This playfulness, this humor, which also is very present in the contemporary poetry in the Baltic states. This was my big thought.
That was interesting to hear. I have never played this game. I hope you will teach it to me. Maybe we shall play it tonight afterwards. Because also adults can play interesting games. But the motive about the marriage of the sun and the moon, in fact, I combined two mythologies. And the main motive is borrowed from Siberia Selkupi mythology. They are living at the Ob River, but they are also speaking Uralic language. And Estonian also belongs to this very large family, and the Finno-Ugrian languages. But this motive of the sword underwater, it comes from a certain Estonian very old mythical song. So I just put two things together.
Yeah, reacting to Dovilė's question, I was thinking that maybe, in terms of my poetry at least, I would like to substitute the word intertextuality with community, because when I write, for me it's often very important, not in every poem, but now and then it's very important to create some kind of community or enter this community of poets and other texts, and to see how I can make some connections across time, not just between other living persons, but also with the dead. Yeah. So community, I think it's a little bit. It sounds friendlier. Intertextuality sounds very academic, right?
Yeah, it should be called Dead and Alive Writers Community. And then centering on one poem that Hasso read recently, the one about the holes. So since we are centering here on places, spaces, vanishing and disappearing, I was thinking that, so then from this point of view, the whole is also a type of place, that not being is also a type of being, and it can go on and go on and drive us really, really mad.
When I read this, heard this poem, the whole and the universe was also mentioned. And connecting the vanishing points, the term wormhole came into my mind. Like it's the also thing that connects two places, and you cannot be in the two places at the same time. You cannot really switch between the places. If you go to the other place, you cannot really come back. And also the vanishing point, and also the poem we heard about Alice, which was a bit of, I saw it as this magic realism inspired poem, where some parts of the reality are exchanged for something real, unreal, and it leaves those holes in reality. And as an author if the author doesn't fill them, then those become those wormholes, which the reader can really fill up with their own realities. And so poetry can also be. Poetry is a great thing. Like it can really allow the reader to travel between realities, and if the writer writes, the poem writes.
Yeah, that's true. The whole is the connection point, and it is also, well, the condition of life. Without holes, there would be no life at all, and it is also a possibility to escape from space that has become too suffocating.
Yeah, and I very much like the way how holes as, well, markers of absence, holes as spaces where things get lost or where things disappear, how holes become present in this poem. So they get a kind of body. The void gets a bodily appearance here, and I really like the way how, from step to step we learn that holes make things visible, and so the socks do not disappear anymore, but they are visible through the holes in the shoes. And then in the next step we learn that holes do not only make things visible, but make a vision possible, like the holes in the skull. So I learned a lot about holes, I guess.
Artis, did you learn something about holes today?
Yeah, Eckhard actually stole my comment in a way, because because I was just thinking exactly that well, hole is usually something, it's kind of negative space, but Hasso did a really good job turning it into a positive element.
But not completely positive, because negativity is necessary. I think so.
And then the last question, since time is an enemy always, or sometimes. So we talked about playfulness a bit, and the poem about when does the mom come home is written in a very peculiar graphical form, which also connects a few poets of today, the use of the graphic space. And in the blank page. And all of that leads me to think about playfulness and humor. And the question is a bit broader than only the poetry. So what happens when you start to think about ourselves and the world too seriously?
No. I'm scared to answer.
Please do.
Was it a question for me or?
For the broad panelists.
I mean, what I realized is, I think if you cannot see it, but they all look the same, which brings up the question, and I think this is what the poem is about, is 2 hours and 20 minutes and 10 minutes from a certain perspective simply the same. And maybe that leads us back to your initial point of mythical time. So why care about 2 hours or 10 minutes? It all comes back to the same scheme.
Yeah, basically the poem is about mythical time, and I would even say a certain mythical tension, because, well, in fact, it's a documentary poem. I just wrote it like it was. I wrote down what my child said while she was swinging and waiting for mommy to come home, and we had a dialogue, and it was endless because, and I started to realize that, well, our perception of time is so different, and really, I don't know what does it mean when I say 2 hours or 20 minutes, or I just look on the watch or timetable and say something, but really I know from my own experience that 2 hours might be totally different. Sometimes 2 hours they just vanish, so that you even don't notice, and sometimes it's an endless time. And so this, yeah, it comes from real life, but it points to somewhere else.
I remember when I was young, there was a trendy word as a psychological time, which basically meant that every person has a different setup for grasping time. And also in this poem it showed that in the Western culture, so something is written, and on the left side is the most important, is the beginning, and then everything. But this poem is written like the other way around, and at the left side, what is most important in this poem, the beginning of the poem, is "I can't wait." And I think that the child doesn't really care about the other part of the poem. He just wants to express the emotion. I can't wait, I can't wait. And the other poem is just, I don't even know what it is. It's yeah, some waiting for the time to come where the mother comes home. It's this waiting gray zone where the time feels too long and too. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's also important that although this time of waiting, it totally seems endless, but finally, when mother really steps in from the door, comes home, it disappears. Everything vanishes. It means nothing anymore.
Yeah, Dovilė was asking about fun and reading poetry for I don't know, almost 20 years now. I have an impression that Estonian poets have more fun than Latvian poets up there, and yeah.
And maybe
Latvian poets are more serious, I guess, and I'm a great example of that. So, but I'm happy that we had some chuckles over Krista's poems.
Okay. And maybe we can check out if Lithuanians also have some fun. No. Dovilė, will you please?
Yeah, so I think the discussion time vanished, and now we will see how serious some Lithuanians can be. Oh my God. So I will start with one in Lithuanian for you to see that I can actually be fluent in a language or appear fluent. Svetima, viskas taip svetima. Miesto kontūrai blunka, kai blunka kraujas, kai geriasi medžiaga. Viskas, kas buvo raudona, netenka spalvos. Viskas, kas buvo spalvota, tampa raudona. Varnos kapsto šiukšlynę, jau nėra ko atkast, bet dar bus. Dar giliau, jeigu svetima, viskas jau svetima, jau tęsias per tamsumą, slenka kraujagyslėm. Žvilgsnis nudurtas žemyn, žiūrėk. Žiūrėk, kur eini. Paskui dar netyčia įklimpsi, purvas, vasarį, kova tai būna. Nes lyja, nes rūkas, nes labai, nes po ašalo žemė. Suglebus pilka, kimba, po batų kulnų ir nešies. Ir visur jį randi. Akmenukų namuos užantį, kas be akmens tegul. Ir viskas, kaip viskas svetima. Plaukia pro šalį, viduj tik kažkas dar liepsnoja. Kraujo liežuviai laižantys trupančias sienas. Skylančias, skylančias, skylančias. Manau, esi man už mane svetimesnis. And now the same in English. How alien everything is, how alien the contours of the city, fading like blood fades, seeping into fabric. Everything that was red loses its color. Everything that was colorful becomes red. Crows rummage in the garbage dump. There is nothing to dig up, but there will be, deeper still yet, if everything is alien, already alien, stretching through darkness, sinking through veins, the gaze thrown down. Look where you're going, or else you'll accidentally step in a dirt. In February, March it happens, because rain, because mist, because after the freeze, the ground is limp, gray, sticky under your heels, and you carry it everywhere, finding stones at home under your bosom. Let him who is without stones, and everything alien swims by without touching you inside, but sometimes still flames, with tongues of blood, licking the crumbling walls, cracking or aching. I think you are more alien to me than I am to myself. Vilnius Litany. Do you remember my name, my dear city? Sundering, disintegrating, sinking lower and lower into grandeur. My mad Jesuit city of loves and vows, broken, decorated with the crowns of ravens, situated between rivers, between the scattered rosy pearls of this and that kingdom, city of shacks and radiance, city of kunchinas and vegans, gluten-free, sprouting with hipsters of generation Y and Z, all touched up with boyish cherubic faces. I am coming to take you back. I know that you will swallow me. Ghetto. When I told him I am from a bedroom neighborhood, I somehow saw myself with a tracksuit, leaning on a kebab kiosk wall, pocket full of sunflower seeds, knuckles caked with glittering blood, eyes of lead, and as cars drove by, gold teeth would occasionally shine. I assume I'm telling you all this out of the emptiness of my being, because things are rather empty right now, because it's not important at all whether your neighborhood is for sleeping or is it always awake. If at the break of day the light goes straight through, if it threats to you, if it opens. Landslide. This entire city was founded above bogs, glutted with the bones of who knows who. At night, they rattle and grumble. But really, this music is only for the lonely. Teens, wet to their bones, stuffed into the buses, a one-legged yet still breathing pigeon pressed against the wall, the hill slipping far away from everyone, in the middle of Žirmūnai, A granny with a child's mind feeds the gulls, while nursing home patients stand with the shrimp-hungry faces of birds preparing for their final flight. A crow by the roadside slowly pulls the innards of a roadkill street cat, the kind of street you sometimes see yourself walking, where wooden houses cover silently over moss, the birdhouse-like dormitories, the stone wall, concrete, loose bricks, crumbling plaster, cracked roofs, mold creeping over a blue wall, even rooks glaring with shining eyes from closet, drawers, from under tables and cushions. This entire city is just a model, a test against another world, a more real one. And then I will finish with one poem, the most recent one, the one that I actually think that is worth reading now from my perspective. So it's called Vanishing Points, and I stole the title from the panel, and I'm not regretful. And it has an epigraph which says, instead of an epigraph, 24th of February 2022. Someone is sitting at a pseudo-Baroque table and is bargaining for the sky, for a barrel of blood, for cubic meters of space. Someone feels insulted because they have been sent to hell with a boat or without a boat, or because they don't get any sympathy or respect, because there is almost not yet nearly a drop of juicy blood rolling down their forehead. Someone steps out of a car with diplomatic plates and demonstrates to the world their perfectly white starched cuffs. They shake hands, they smile, pose for pictures, and then stand around for a while. And what is today's speed of death per second? Someone sympathizes very deeply, usually the same person who likes to censure and condemn, preferably several times per day. Someone is drinking coffee and breaking bread and doesn't notice that everything they touch leaves a trail of blood. Someone unscrews language so that it writes and twitches. People turn into civilians. They turn into murderers, victims, numbers, fools. Tyrants turn into politicians. Letters of the alphabet are stained with a layer of coagulated blood. And we turn in circles, orbiting ourselves while they become more free. We turn like tops while they become more free. We turn at such speed that we grow dull from wear while they become more free each day, more free than Hades, Styx, and Valhalla altogether.
Yeah, thank you, Dovilė, for your wonderful poetry. As this is the final panel, I also wanted to bring in a new concept, which maybe gathers around also the others we have mentioned. And when listening and reading your poetry before, I encountered this sharp desire of belonging, which is in a way something different, but also there is no belonging without vanishing and no vanishing but without belonging. And as one of the methods Dovilė tries to belong is through the many processes of the city, like walking, turning into something, turning attention to something. So my question is, well, do you agree with me? And how narratives are structured through embodying the city and belonging, vanishing. What was it to you, Paul?
Well, I was just, I think when I read first those poems by Dovilė, from the very first lines I started to think that, if I can say it directly, this girl somehow suspects reality. She is not so sure whether it is really real or not. And so it went on, and there's some kind of an atmosphere of violence that, is known to me from my youth also, and blood often appears, but then this feeling of strangeness, the reality itself is somewhat disappearing, or the viewpoint, if it exists, there sometimes it seems to exist, sometimes not, but it somehow is slipping out of your hands, and you really don't know where you are. Is it true?
Well, I think that to sum up me, to convert this in a therapy session, I do two things very well in life. One is walking. I love walking, and the other one's vanishing. So yeah, that's that.
But what is reality to you? Is reality real? Is poetry more real?
I think that the vanishing is the most real thing. So that's why I said what I do is vanish, because somehow what Hasso mentioned, when you walk through the city, you see how detached you are from everything and everyone, and how also connected you are. I'm not making a lot of sense right now, I know. But yeah, this experience of vanishing, somehow, of not belonging, that tension, somehow I find it very legitimate form of expressing what existence is, what life is. It's the tension of being and not, belonging and not, being here and there. So.
Yeah, I have had an expression hearing Dovilė's poems that she's very present in them, and very present in this space that she's depicting, and it creates, or it is combined with a sense of something slightly frightening happening in the background. There's this kind of strange dark tension there.
And I think the kind of the way you connected your poems, you tell a story by this. So we have this fading, we have this losing color, we have the blood which loses its color, which is like sipping in and fading, and we have this idea of fading, losing color. Then in the end, it's let's say losing life. So this atmosphere of fading, of disappearing, suddenly turns into something else. And how is that? By means of the verb to turn. And I mean, we talked about turning points, which is the idea of a kind of static or marker which you can identify. But what happens in your poem, and I think it kind of moves one, or at least it moved me, that you introduced the turn or the turning as a movement in time, so people turn into civilians, they turn into murder victims, tyrants turn into politicians, and then you realize it goes on. We turn in cycles, we turn like tops, we turn at such speed, and so it takes up speed, and that's not a question and not a comment, just I really like the way you found a way from this fading to this movement of turning, which does not mean that things get better.
Maybe then poetry can be seen also as a movement a movement of awareness, because in your poetry I also saw you said it maybe doesn't make sense to belong and vanish at the same time. I think it is very human and very, like, this is how our awareness works. When we go to our head, we vanish from our bodies, detach ourselves from somewhere. And I saw a big this revolution against the known, also the structure, the seinen, in your poetry. Like, this detachment allows you to somehow see things clearer, and this awareness, this poetry as a method, as Eckhard also said, poetry as a method in this introduction. This awareness as a process can, sum up this belonging and this vanishing at the same time.
I think that on my side it's very ambiguous, because I get inspiration or whatever it is to write from too much attachment. But then when I end what I'm writing, it always looks written from detachment. So I don't know how do I manage to do that, but that's the process. And while we sit in silence, I will answer the question risen before me reading. We really do have really funny poets in Lithuania, but that's not me.
Okay. And how it is in Lithuanian poetry with the city? Do you actually that could be a question to all of you? Do you consider yourself as city poets, or?
Well, maybe I was a city poet for a while. When I was working on this collection, Gestures, I was living in Riga, and I think Riga as a city, as a kind of structure, impacted my poetry quite a lot. But after I moved from Riga to this small village nearby sea, I don't write about city that much, but I often get inspired when I visit some cities abroad in Europe. Then it's somehow creates this this need to write poetry. I don't know why, but it's not necessarily about those cities, but something about new cities or big cities. It's somehow inspiring, yeah, in a way. They remind me that I should write poems.
No.
I don't know why.
I think that, the city is, for me, it's a very familiar atmosphere. And I have basically always lived in cities or towns. And but at the same time, it doesn't mean much to me. It's simply like a certain background for thinking, and if the atmosphere really turns violent, then it's a different thing, because then really something happens. Like in Dovile's poems, there is this atmosphere. I perceived it like a tension between anxiety and fear. And anxiety is that everything just vanishes from before your sight, and you somehow become detached. But fear appears when you notice that you yourself are too visible in this cityscape, and sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it's not, and then you'll have to vanish yourself quite quickly. and well, that's this tension between the two things. I think that I have really, well, for me, this cityscape, I become really conscious of it when this feeling of anxiety turns into fear, because then I have to look where shall I run, or where should I hide myself? It's not so easy always in the city. It's much easier, for example, even when you are walking in a wood, in a forest that is becoming dark already, but you feel much safer even if you notice that somebody's eyes are following you.
The city, coming back to Krista's question, is it common in Lithuanian poetry? I would say yes, especially the capital, Vilnius, is very present. We have poets that work beautifully on the topic from very different perspectives, very different points of view. So I think that's there. For me, I'm personally, it's curious that I write so much about the city, because I am very much, again, in between two things. I love nature and being outside. I grew up spending half of a year in the teeny tiny village and half of a year in the capital. So I ache and long for nature and the sea and the greenness as if it were a person, I think. I mean, being isolated only in the city hurts physically sometimes.
I think the time is already past 6. We promised to.
Dinner time.
And on 6, the time is catching up. And I'm very glad that we had so many listeners. We didn't know that it will be like that. And thank you so much for listening to our poems and listening to our discussions. And if you have questions, then now or no.
Now or later.
Later. Yeah.
I mean, at least, as you can see, my name somehow vanished in this list, indicating that I did not bring my not yet written poems, and I'm not going to read them. But, I mean, this leaves space to say thank you to you here on stage. So thank you to Krista, and thank you to Dovilė, and thank you to Artis and Hasso, and thanks to Isabella for giving us this carte blanche. And I hope you, well, I don't dare to say I hope you enjoyed the evening, because we talked about humor and laughing and had some different issues. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this evening.
Thank you.
I would like to thank you for the poems and for this philosophical panel. I have many fragments of the poems and also things you said that still resonate and will resonate about what vanishing means, etc. And Krista, Anna, and Hasso will be back on stage tomorrow morning at 11 in a panel called You Next Could Read, where we will have 4 authors that tell us what they like to read themselves. So not authors, but readers, and what books have been important to them. And we will continue with poetry this evening at 8 o'clock with Semyon Khanin, a Latvian poet writing in Russian, and he will perform his poems with a Swiss double bass player, a contrabassist, Christian Weber, also kind of carte blanche as they will improvise. So again, we will just see what's going to happen this evening. So book table outside, tea on the 3rd floor, and see you back at 8 o'clock.